My college advisor glanced down at the holes in my jeans. I had just come to her, shaken and scared, trying to talk about the assault. But instead of support, she looked me in the eye and asked, "Why the hell were you alone with him? Especially dressed like that?" When I pushed back and questioned why nothing was being done to hold him accountable, she rolled her eyes like I was being naive. "You're mixing up real life with some kind of fairy tale," she said. "Boys will be boys." I didn't respond. Not a single word. That conversation happened 6 semesters ago. Yesterday, they escorted her off campus. They'd locked her office from the outside. The whole university had become this twisted kind of safe zone for predators. On our first day as freshmen, we were herded into a big auditorium and given an hour-long presentation about personal boundaries. The speaker was this older man, the kind who still used a blocky Nokia phone. He had long, snow-white hair, little beady eyes, and a suit so expensive it practically screamed hush money. He told us that 80% of reported campus assaults involved alcohol. "So what does this tell us?" he asked. The room fell dead quiet. "Girls who drink are 80% more likely to be assaulted," he said. "So the fix is obvious. Don't drink, no problem." I sat there in shock, my jaw hanging open. But I snapped it shut fast when I noticed some guy across the room staring straight at me while adjusting himself through his gym shorts. That's when my phone buzzed. A text popped up from my roommate Lena, even though she was sitting right next to me. She said her older sister had gone to the same school and warned her never to report anything because her sorority sisters told her it only made things worse. I pinched the bridge of my nose. Lena was always upbeat and kind of dramatic in a funny way, so I assumed she was just being her usual self. I texted back, "No way," and then shut off my phone. But a week later, it hit me, I was part of the problem. I brought up Lena's warning as a joke to the girl leading my campus tour. The moment I said it, her smile disappeared. I frowned, confused, not sure what I'd said wrong. That's when she looked at me and said, almost whispering, "I reported someone last year." Her voice was so soft it barely even registered as speech. She told me she lost her scholarship because of it. Said she'd had to borrow money from her family, who were already struggling, just to afford rent. I hesitated, but asked anyway, what happened to the guy? A big part of me didn't even want to hear the answer. "He got rewarded," she said. "They called me a liar. He ended up with my scholarship." My stomach twisted. Now, one thing you should know about me is that I've always had other girls' backs. If you and I like the same guy, I'll step back and let you have him. No question. So when I saw Nina, this girl I barely knew, sitting there, looking like the world had chewed her up and spit her out, I knew I couldn't just walk away. I didn't go to the cops. Didn't blast anything on social media. Didn't even tell a single friend. Because I decided right then and there that I was going to play the long game. I spent the next 2 semesters walking the straightest line imaginable. I was practically living like a Mormon. No booze. Spent my weekends doing Chloe Ting workouts and hitting every single study group. I wiped almost all traces of myself off social media. But none of that made a difference in the end. One day, I showed up to my science study group a little early. Only one other person was there, Evan. I sat down next to him out of basic politeness and kept my eyes glued to the floor, hoping he'd take the hint and stay quiet. But, of course, he couldn't help himself. He leaned over and said, "Would love to see those pretty eyes doing something besides staring at books all day." At first, I thought he was joking, just trying to mess with me. Then I got a notification, "Evan is typing," on Snapchat. He messaged me, "I'll show you mine if you show me yours." I looked up and saw that smug smirk plastered across his face. This guy really thought he was some kind of ladies' man, Lord Felix Creighton, if you will. I figured my silence would be enough to send the message that I wasn't interested. I was wrong. Let's just say what he sent next, straight from his My Eyes Only folder, was enough to make me lose it. I broke down crying right then and there, struggling to breathe. See, the last time I had to face something even close to sexual, it was when a man stole my innocence as a kid. I hadn't planned to include that part of my story. But now, I think it matters. So there I was, sobbing and shaking, when Evan had the nerve to put his hand on my back. What started as a fake show of sympathy turned into him trying to unhook my bra. I bolted to the bathroom and locked myself in a stall, rocking back and forth on the toilet lid, trying to pull myself together. Eventually, I wiped my tears and marched straight to my advisor's office. I wanted to report it. I thought, at the very least, she'd guide me through the process. Instead, she hit me with the same line as before. "Why the hell were you alone with him, especially dressed like that?" she asked, once again pointing to my ripped jeans like they were some kind of invitation. I smiled. Not because I was okay, but because I had something she didn't know about. I had an ace up my sleeve. My dad's a powerful lawyer, the one who got my childhood abuser locked up. And he'd do anything to protect me. And guess what? I had recorded our entire conversation. That night, I called my dad. He didn't say a word while he played the recording 3 times over. Then he calmly told me to document everything. Keep my head down. He'd file the complaint himself, but said we needed more proof first. I trusted him completely. The very next day, rumors started spreading like wildfire. Evan was telling everyone I was unstable, making things up for attention. His fraternity brothers were everywhere. They sat behind me in the library, snapping photos. Followed me to the dining hall, filming me while I ate. One of them even stood outside my dorm room for 20 minutes straight, just staring at my door. I kept my phone recording at all times. That night, Nina messaged me asking if I was okay. She said she recognized what was going on because the same thing happened to her. I told her I was fine. But somehow, she could still hear the fear in my voice, even through a text. Then Lena started acting distant. She'd get up and leave whenever I walked in. She stopped inviting me to lunch. I figured Evan's little gang had gotten to her too. But one night, she broke down crying. She said they'd been sending her anonymous messages, threatening her scholarship. Told her that if she stayed friends with me, they'd make sure she lost it. That's when she finally told me what she'd been hiding. Her sister was Evan's first victim, 2 years ago. She ended up dropping out after losing her scholarship. Lena had been carrying that around since freshman year. I hugged her tight and told her none of it was her fault. We both cried for what felt like an hour. The school finally launched an investigation, but they were dragging their feet. My first interview was set 3 weeks out. In the meantime, my grades mysteriously started tanking. Assignments I turned in on time were suddenly marked as late. Tests I'd nailed with confidence were now coming back stamped with failing marks. Even my attendance record was suddenly showing I'd skipped classes I clearly remembered sitting through. That's when it hit me, someone with high-level access was tampering with my records. I took screenshots of everything: grades, absences, submission timestamps, and sent it all straight to my dad. Without missing a beat, he brought in a private investigator. The PI started poking around Evan's background and looking into his ties to the university. And sure enough, there it was: Evan's uncle worked in administration. Not just that, he was the same guy who handled Nina's complaint. The same one behind Lena's sister's case too. A pattern was starting to form, and it wasn't subtle. Soon after, I got called into this mandatory meeting with 3 university officials. They said Evan had filed a counter-complaint, accused me of harassment. Then they pulled out a bunch of screenshots that supposedly proved it. They were clearly doctored, full-on fake conversations I had never had. Messages twisted to make me look unhinged. I stayed calm, even though I was boiling inside. Asked them for copies. They flat out refused, claiming it was confidential material. So, of course, I recorded that whole conversation too. Meanwhile, the PI confirmed what we already suspected. Evan's uncle was not just involved, he was the ringleader behind the scenes. He'd been with the university for over 15 years. He had keys to the kingdom. Student records, complaints, footage, you name it, he could alter or delete it. And based on what we were uncovering, he'd been abusing that power for years. Then one day I walked into my dorm room and instantly knew something was wrong. Everything had been messed with, but nothing was missing. My underwear drawer was dumped out on my bed. My laptop was moved. Personal photos were scattered across the floor like someone had flipped through them on purpose. It wasn't a robbery, it was a message. They were letting me know they could reach me whenever they wanted. After that, I installed a hidden camera in my room. Not long after, Nina reached out again. Said she wanted to meet in person. We picked a small coffee shop off campus, away from prying eyes. She kept scanning the room, nervous. Then she leaned in and told me something I wasn't ready for. She'd kept everything from her case. The footage the school claimed had been corrupted? She had a copy. The complaint they said was lost? She still had the original. She even saved threatening emails from Evan's uncle, ones where he told her to drop the case or suffer the consequences. She had been too afraid to act on any of it back then. Lena's sister agreed to meet up too. Turns out, she still had all her documentation, the same paperwork the university swore never existed. She showed me emails from administrators trying to manipulate her, telling her she must have misunderstood what happened, that she was overreacting, that she'd ruin a young man's life over a miscommunication. That night, the four of us, me, Nina, Lena, and her sister, started a secure, encrypted group chat. At first, it was just the four of us. But it didn't stay that way for long. Nina knew another girl who had a story. And that girl brought in two more. By the end of the week, we had a group of 7. 7 victims. All of us with disturbingly similar stories. Evan. His frat brothers. His uncle. Same names. Same tactics. Same cover-ups. That's when Lena volunteered to go undercover. She started cozying up to Evan's circle, pretending like she'd finally ditched me for the cool crowd. They fell for it right away. Guys like that always assume girls will sell each other out for attention. She learned about their group chats, shared folders, and how they talked about women like they were some kind of prize collection. We were trophies to them. Just wins to brag about. One night, Lena texted me, freaking out. She'd gotten access to one of their laptops during a party and found a folder labeled wins. Inside were photos and videos of girls from our school, some clearly taken without permission, some where the girls were too drunk to even realize what was happening. My stomach turned. But at last, we had real evidence. Meanwhile, my dad's PI had been putting the bigger picture together. He was building a timeline, contacting past students who had suddenly transferred or dropped out, following paper trails from complaints that had mysteriously disappeared. He uncovered 12 victims over a 5-year span. 12 young women failed by the exact same system, all connected to Evan's uncle, all tied to the same frat culture that thought it was untouchable. Evan, on the other hand, was getting bolder by the day. He started showing up wherever I went. Not doing anything overt, just standing a little too close, letting that familiar cologne waft in. The same scent I remembered from the study room. He'd whisper things under his breath. Stuff no one else could hear. Give it up, he'd say. No one believes you anyway. You're wasting your time. Then I got summoned to yet another meeting, this time by his uncle. He sat across from me with this faux concern on his face, telling me my grades were slipping, that maybe this wasn't a healthy environment for me anymore. I smiled, nodded, and made sure every word got recorded. He had no idea what was coming. The other girls were finding their courage too. For the first time, we met in person, all 7 of us, gathered in Nina's little apartment. We laid it all out. Compared timelines, shared messages, connected dots. We cried together. We even laughed a little, because for once, none of us felt alone in it. Some of these girls had been carrying this pain for years. And now, they finally had people who believed them. Lena kept feeding us information from the inside. Evan and his boys were planning something for the upcoming party. They were joking about fresh meat, about putting girls in their place. Lena recorded it all. We knew we were running out of time. We had to act fast. My dad and his legal team were almost done. The case was solid, but he said we still needed one final piece. We needed Evan to incriminate himself, to expose the whole operation, to tie it back to his uncle with no room for doubt. It felt like a long shot. Guys like Evan don't confess. They double down until the bitter end. But I had an idea. Evan's ego was his weakness. He lived to brag, to flaunt what he'd done, who he knew, and how safe he thought he was. So I set the stage. I invited him to meet me on the 3rd floor of the library, back corner. Same spot where this whole nightmare started. I made sure to show up early, pick a table with solid acoustics, and triple-check my voice recorder. Little red blinking. Everything was ready. I waited, watching students wander by with iced coffees and backpacks, unaware of what was about to go down. Evan rolled in 20 minutes late. Classic power move. Wearing his usual frat boy uniform, khakis, boat shoes, and that navy blue polo with the Greek letters stitched on the chest. He slid into the seat across from me, smirk plastered across his face. That same look that used to make my skin crawl. Now, it just fueled my resolve. I stayed calm. Flat expression. Leaned on every acting class I ever took. I told him I was thinking about dropping the complaint. Said I couldn't handle the stress. My grades were suffering. I was exhausted. He lit up like a kid unwrapping a PlayStation on Christmas morning, leaning back like he'd just won some prize, manspreading like he owned the place. And I fed him every single word he wanted to hear. I told him I just wanted to move on with my life, leave this whole mess behind. And he bought it completely, like the entitled predator he was. Started going on about how smart I was for finally seeing the bigger picture. Said this was better for everyone. Told me he was relieved I finally understood how things really worked. That's when I played dumb. I widened my eyes just a little, like I was confused and naive. I asked him why the school seemed to be so against me. Why they jumped to defend him without even bothering to investigate. And just like I'd hoped, his ego took the wheel. He started bragging about his uncle, the dean of student affairs. Said he'd smoothed over situations like this more times than he could count. Literally used air quotes when he said misunderstandings. I kept playing the part, asking questions that sounded innocent, tilting my head like I was genuinely curious. And he just kept talking. The more I let him talk, the more excited he got. Told me all about Nina, the scholarship student from last year who'd tried to report him. Said she was taken care of. Then he mentioned Lena's sister. Said she was so shaken up, she couldn't even finish filing the complaint. He even dropped names I didn't recognize: Chloe, Sophia, Megan. Girls who just vanished mid-semester. No warning, no goodbye. Girls too scared to speak up. He was so proud of it all. Like he was listing off game scores, instead of talking about real people whose lives had been torn apart. Lena was sitting a few tables over, maybe 15 feet away. She had her laptop open, camera recording, angled perfectly toward us. She'd told Evan's friends she was studying for organic chemistry that night. They didn't question it. Why would they? She'd been playing the part for weeks now, laughing at their gross jokes, acting impressed by their expensive watches and daddy-funded bank accounts. She had them fooled. Evan leaned in close to me. Too close. I could smell his cologne, some fancy designer brand that hit like a punch in the throat. His breath reeked of energy drinks and that gross mix of arrogance and entitlement. He told me I should be grateful for this deal he was offering. That most girls didn't get the chance to walk away quietly. Said his uncle usually made things way harder for the ones who didn't know their place. That I was lucky he liked me enough to go easy on me. Then he made his biggest mistake. He pulled out his phone, brand new iPhone in some flashy designer case, and told me he wanted me to see what I'd be up against if I kept pushing forward. He opened that shared drive Lena had told us about. Their so-called trophy room. Started scrolling through folders, each one labeled with a girl's name. Each one a violation, a life cataloged for leverage. He clicked on one labeled Brittany_2020 and showed me what they had on her. Photos taken without permission. Screenshots of her private messages. Her class schedule. Her home address. I felt like I was going to throw up. But I kept my face calm, kept my hands clasped tight under the table so he couldn't see them shaking. I asked gently, "How many girls are in there?" He laughed. Said he'd stopped counting after 50. Told me his uncle helped them stay organized, just in case one of the girls ever got mouthy. Said they'd been building that archive for years. That no one could touch them because their family had poured millions into the university. Because, as he so lovingly put it, we own this place. My phone buzzed. A text from Lena, a simple thumbs-up emoji. She'd gotten screenshots of the whole drive while he was showing off. Even snapped a clear picture of his phone screen with the file names. We had him. But I needed one final piece. So I asked him about that day in the study room. Told him I wanted to know what I'd done wrong so I could avoid misunderstandings in the future. His face shifted immediately. The fake charm dropped. What was left behind was the real Evan. His eyes turned hard, cold. Told me I hadn't done anything wrong. Said he knew exactly what he was doing. That he just wanted to see if I was really as innocent and untouchable as I acted. Said girls like me needed to be taught a lesson about the real world. That I should be grateful he'd only shown me pictures because it could have been a lot worse. I nodded and smiled like I understood. Thanked him for being honest. For explaining it so clearly. Then I stood up, slowly. Deliberately. My legs were shaking but I moved like I was in control. As I passed him, he grabbed my wrist. Not hard enough to bruise, but firm. A warning. His fingers were cold and heavy, like iron cuffs. He leaned in and said I'd better not forget our conversation. Told me if I changed my mind about dropping the complaint, things would get much worse. Said his uncle had friends at every university in the state, that I'd be blacklisted from higher education altogether. I didn't say a word. Just pulled my arm away and walked off, steady and slow. Every part of me wanted to run. But I didn't. I counted every step. Lena followed a few minutes later, playing the part of the casual study buddy, slipping her laptop into her bag. We met up in the bathroom at the end of the hallway. The moment the door closed behind us, we collapsed into each other's arms. Hugged so tight I could barely breathe. Both of us were shaking. But we had done it. We had everything. That night, our group chat blew up. Everyone had already heard through our network. Nina broke down crying when she found out Evan had mentioned her by name. She said it brought everything rushing back. Lena's sister got physically sick when we told her about the folders. She'd seen her name on that digital wall of shame. But none of us were backing down now. We agreed. This was the turning point. No more victims. We were fighters now. My dad flew in the next morning, red-eye from Seattle. Walked straight into my dorm room and listened to the recordings. His face got darker and more serious with every word. He flipped through screenshots, scrolled through the folders, and took notes the way only a seasoned lawyer can, quick, precise, methodical. He booked a conference room at a nearby hotel and sat down with every single girl, one by one. Listened to their stories. Looked them in the eyes. Took them seriously. He wasn't just building a case around me. He was building a full pattern, something they couldn't ignore or sweep under the rug. And right around then, Evan started acting different. He got paranoid. Started looking over his shoulder on campus. Stopped smirking. One day, he even accused Lena of being a mole in front of his entire friend group. She didn't flinch. Put on the performance of a lifetime. Should have gotten an Oscar for it. Told them I was just bitter. That I was making up lies because I was jealous. Said she'd never betray them for some uptight chick who couldn't take a joke. Lena even managed to force out fake tears, just enough to smudge her mascara. They bought it completely because guys like that never expect a girl to be that convincing. They can't imagine being lied to by someone smarter than them. The following week, Evan's uncle called me into his office again. But this time, he didn't even bother with the fake concern. The mask was off. He got straight to the point, told me in no uncertain terms that if I didn't back off, I'd destroy my own future. Said no grad school would touch me once he was done dragging my name through the mud. Claimed he had friends at every major university, every major lab, and that he'd ruin any shot I had at working in my field. I just smiled and thanked him for the warning. Watched the red creep up his face as he realized I wasn't scared of him anymore. After that, things got worse. Way worse. One day I opened my dorm door and found a dead rat lying on the welcome mat. A week later, it was a bird. Both times, there was a note. You're next. My car tires were slashed twice in 1 week. And conveniently, the security cameras in the parking lot just happened to malfunction, both times. Then the online attacks started. Fake accounts were spreading rumors that I was sleeping with professors to get ahead. Photos of me, taken without my knowledge, started popping up online, plastered with cruel captions, claiming I did things at parties I'd never even attended. They were trying to break me, piece by piece. But what they didn't realize is that something had changed. I wasn't fighting this alone anymore. The other girls, they became my armor. Without even planning it, we formed a kind of protection squad. We walked each other to class in groups, never alone. We studied in crowded places, near exits. We ate together in the dining hall like a tight-knit team. Nina started teaching us self-defense in her apartment, how to break someone's grip, how to use our keys if we needed to fight back. Lena's sister shared techniques from her therapy sessions. Things to help us cope, to stay grounded. Together, we became stronger than we'd ever been by ourselves. Then, finally, it was time. On a Friday afternoon, my dad's legal team filed everything. Not just school complaints, criminal charges, and a full federal Title IX complaint, too. It was massive. Hundreds of pages. Evan, four of his frat brothers, and his uncle were named specifically. Every piece of evidence, meticulously cataloged and organized. Recordings. Screenshots. Emails. Witness statements from 12 women. The truth laid bare. When the courthouse clerk stamped each document, her eyes widened like she couldn't believe what she was seeing. At first, the university tried to sweep it under the rug. Their PR machine kicked in hard. Letters showed up in our mailboxes, printed on official letterhead, warning us not to discuss ongoing investigations, reminding us of the importance of confidentiality and preserving the university's reputation. And, of course, protecting our futures. My dad read mine and let out a cold, bitter laugh. They're terrified, he said. And they should be. The following Monday, Evan was arrested right outside his frat house. I wasn't there, but Lena saw the whole thing from across the quad. She said he tried to run when the squad cars pulled up. Yelled about his rights, about his father's lawyers. Claimed we were ruining his life over nothing. None of us missed the irony. He was finally feeling just a sliver of the fear he'd forced on others. His friends were rounded up over the next few days. Pulled from classes, practices, dining halls. Evan's uncle was the last to go. Still smug, even as the cuffs were clicked behind his back. They got him in the middle of a meeting with donors. Found stacks of files in his office, some still warm from the shredder. Evidence of a decade and a half of cover-ups. Paper trails that led back to victims we hadn't even heard of. Girls who'd never gotten their justice. Once the investigation expanded, more survivors started coming forward. Some from 5, 10 years ago. Some who had never spoken about it until now. They finally felt safe enough to be heard. And then Lena, she dropped her cover like a bombshell. She pulled the remaining frat boys into a group and laid it all out. Told them she'd recorded everything, every cruel joke, every locker room comment. Every time they bragged about the trophies they kept hidden. Told them the FBI now had access to that drive. Every file, every photo. Evidence logged and tagged. Some of them actually cried when they realized how deep they'd been played. That was when the university went into full-on damage control mode. Suddenly, they were concerned about student safety. Suddenly, they wanted to hear our stories and take accountability. Suddenly, they were sorry. It was all performative. But still, something was shifting. They brought in a whole new administrative team. Professionals who actually knew how to handle assault cases. Then Nina got the call. Her scholarship, the one they'd yanked from her after she reported Evan, was being reinstated. Not just reinstated, but back-paid for the semester she'd missed. She even got a formal apology from the university president. She came to my dorm that night and collapsed on the floor, crying for hours. Her family had drained themselves trying to cover the costs. Now, at last, she could breathe again. She could finish her degree. Lena's sister made the decision to return to school. After 2 years away, the university gave her a full scholarship as a way to make amends. They offered trauma-informed therapy, too, whatever she needed to feel safe again. And she moved into our building, just a few doors down from us. She wasn't just the girl we were fighting for anymore. She was one of us. The trial prep was brutal. Long hours, endless paperwork, depositions that left us emotionally raw. Evan's family brought in big-name lawyers, the kind known for defending privileged predators. They tried to paint us as bitter girls hungry for attention. Claimed we made it all up out of jealousy. But the truth didn't bend. The evidence was solid. The pattern unmistakable. The recordings alone told a story no jury could ignore. Even their own lawyers looked uncomfortable at times, especially when our trauma specialists took the stand and explained how and why we reacted the way we did. My dad was a force of nature during that time, running on caffeine and pure conviction. He worked 18-hour days, pulling in expert witnesses from across the country, building a case that didn't just tell a story, it laid bare a system. And it wasn't just Evan on trial anymore. It was everything he represented. Digital forensics experts confirmed the legitimacy of every file we submitted. Former university employees stepped forward, testifying to years of cover-ups they had seen, or had been forced to stay quiet about. My dad was building something bulletproof. A case that couldn't be shredded by money, connections, or high-priced attorneys. Then Evan made one last desperate move. He had his lawyer reach out to mine, said he wanted to apologize for the misunderstanding. Wanted to cut a deal. He'd confess, he said, if I dropped the charges and convinced the other girls to do the same. When my dad heard that, he laughed so hard he actually cried. Said, Deals are for people with something real to offer, not a hollow apology from a man who never thought he'd get caught. The other girls were incredible through it all. We became this makeshift family I never knew I needed. Every Tuesday night, we met at Nina's apartment for group therapy. Sometimes we talked through everything, our trauma, our fears. Other times, we didn't talk at all. Just sat in a circle watching rom-coms, tossing popcorn at each other, or having loud, ridiculous dance parties where we screamed angry lyrics until our voices gave out. It was healing. Slowly, together, brick by brick, we were rebuilding ourselves. Meanwhile, the investigation kept turning up more evidence. Evan's uncle had been orchestrating this for over a decade, maybe even longer. That so-called trophy folder? It went all the way back to when he first got hired after grad school. Some of the women in those files had graduated years ago. They thought it was behind them. Thought they were done with that part of their lives. Now they were being contacted about testifying. And with that came all the pain they thought they'd buried. Then, out of nowhere, the university president resigned. Claimed it was for family health reasons. Yeah, right. We all knew the truth. The board was quietly cleaning house. Everyone tied to the cover-ups was either being forced out or gently pushed into early retirement. It was satisfying to watch, but also enraging. Because they only acted when federal eyes were watching. Then Lena found something that shattered what little piece I'd managed to hold onto. In one of the final downloads from Evan's phone, she discovered messages planning to drug a girl at an upcoming party. They were discussing targets girls who kept to themselves, didn't have many friends to notice if they disappeared for a few hours. Girls who wouldn't be believed if they spoke up. My name was on that list. Starred. I stared at that message and felt something inside me finally snap. I'd been holding myself together with spit and string for months, being strong for everyone, standing tall while the world tried to knock me down. But that broke me. I spent 3 days in bed. Barely moved. The other girls rotated shifts, bringing me food I couldn't eat. Sitting beside me in silence. Reminding me that we'd already won. That he couldn't hurt us anymore. My dad submitted that message as evidence of premeditation. Of intent. Of a pattern. Evan's legal team tried to brush it off, said it was just college boy talk. Just jokes. But with everything else, the jury didn't buy it. Not for a second. This wasn't immaturity. It was calculated. Rehearsed. Repeated. The university, meanwhile, settled the civil suits fast and quietly. They couldn't afford daily headlines or courtroom drama. Each of us received significant financial settlements. For some, that meant reinstated scholarships. For others, it meant tuition refunds and living support. They issued formal apologies, not the vague PR kind, but real ones. In writing. Signed. Public. They even named new student safety policies after us. A small gesture, but real. It wasn't enough to make up for what we endured, but it was something. Something we could point to. Something that meant the next girl might be protected. Evan's uncle pled guilty to avoid a trial. He didn't want every sick detail dragged into open court. He got 5 to 7 years in federal prison. Lost the pension he'd built for decades. His reputation destroyed. When we saw him at sentencing, he looked like a ghost, just another man in an orange jumpsuit. Not powerful anymore. Just small. Evan's criminal trial took months of preparation. We all testified. Every single one of us. Faced cruel cross-examinations meant to discredit us. Sat through hours of footage. Relived our most painful moments in front of strangers. But we stood strong. We held hands during the worst parts. Gave each other strength when our voices shook. Refused to let the system break us the way it was designed to. Then, in a move his own lawyers begged him not to make, Evan took the stand. And it was a disaster. He couldn't stop lying, even when we had his exact words on tape. He got defensive. Angry. Started contradicting himself. The jury didn't just see the evidence. They saw him for who he truly was. His attorneys looked like they'd aged 10 years by the time it was over. The jury took less than a day. Guilty. On all counts. Assault. Harassment. Conspiracy. Evan got 8 to 12 years in state prison. His friends each received sentences depending on their roles. When the verdict was read, Evan's mom screamed from the gallery. Called us liars. Called us whores. The bailiffs had to drag her out. I didn't feel triumph. Just a quiet, heavy kind of peace. We walked out of that courthouse and went straight to Nina's apartment. No words, just silence. We ordered pizza, but most of it sat untouched. Some of us cried until we couldn't anymore. Others laughed at dumb things, not because they were funny, but because we were too numb to know what else to do. We were exhausted, empty and full at the same time. Justice had been served, but that didn't mean we got our time back. Didn't erase the fear, the shame, the innocence stolen piece by piece. But it was over. And it was real. Within months, the university rolled out sweeping reforms. Independent reporting systems. Anonymous, secure, and handled by trained professionals. Mandatory consent education that didn't just check boxes, but actually taught something. Trauma-informed support staff. Safe spaces that felt real. Was it perfect? No. But it was better than what we had. And future students would walk into a safer world because we had refused to stay silent. The next semester, I started speaking at other schools. Packed auditoriums. Eager faces. Nervous questions. I told our story not because I wanted pity, but because people needed to know the signs. The systems. The silence. And how we fought back. I started telling girls to trust their instincts. That uncomfortable gut feeling is there for a reason. Told them to support each other, not compete. To document everything, because when it comes down to it, people will question your memory before they question a man's behavior. And most importantly, to keep going even when it feels like the whole system is built to wear you down. My dad came to as many of my speeches as he could. He always waited until the end, then told me how proud he was. Said I was stronger than he ever thought possible. Nina graduated that spring with honors. She stood up at commencement and gave this beautiful, steady speech about resilience. About how strength is something you find in others and then discover in yourself. About how powerful it is to believe survivors. To stand together. She got a 5-minute standing ovation. And right there in the crowd was Evan's empty seat, reserved, but unoccupied. That silence said everything we needed to say about consequences. Lena's sister crossed the stage that same day too. Shoulders back. Head high. Her family cried from the crowd. Lena and I cried too. We all did. She'd made it all the way back. Proved they couldn't break her, no matter how hard they tried. She was more than what happened in that dark room. She always had been. After graduation, our group stayed tight. Those bonds? They were fire-forged. Unbreakable. We had something no one else could quite understand. Love and loyalty born not just from shared trauma, but from choosing to stay when things got dark. We were more than just survivors, we were sisters. We'd fought side by side. Advocated for each other when the system refused to listen. And we weren't stopping. The ripple effects spread. Other schools started taking a hard look at themselves. Other predators started being exposed. Administrators who once ignored the signs? Removed. Quietly or publicly, but gone. More survivors came forward, finally getting their justice. We had started something bigger than us. We changed the way these things were handled. We made it harder for monsters to hide behind institutional shields. I still get nightmares. Wake up soaked in sweat. Still flinch at certain colognes or when I walk into a study room with no windows. But I'm proud, not just of what we survived, but of what we changed. Of how we stood together and forced a system to reckon with itself. Evan will get out eventually. So will his uncle. Maybe they'll get parole if they behave well. But they'll be registered offenders for life. Every job, every lease, every neighbor will know what they did. It's not enough, not really. But sometimes, not enough is the closest thing to justice you can get. And it has to be enough to move forward. Last year, the university installed a plaque in the library. Right in that third-floor corner where Evan first trapped me. It talks about consent. About respect. About resources. Support. About the power of listening when someone says something happened. I like to imagine Evan seeing it one day. Standing there, remembering what that spot used to be. Where he once felt untouchable. Where he hunted. Now, it's a monument to everything he tried to destroy. We won. Not easily. Not quickly. Not without sacrifice. But in every way that mattered, we won. And when I tell this story now to new students, packed auditoriums, sometimes people who still don't want to hear it, I don't tremble anymore. I don't cry from the weight of it. I feel proud. Proud of what we built. Proud of who we became. Proud that we refused to sit in silence, even when silence was safer. We played the long game. And we beat men who thought they'd never lose. After all that, I tried to settle back into something like normal. Went back to class. Started eating full meals again. Sleeping through the night without jolting awake in fear. The other girls and I kept meeting at Nina's twice a week. We ordered cheap Chinese takeout, watched trashy reality shows, and just existed. No one brought up the trial. Or what came next. Sometimes healing looked like silence and steamed dumplings on a couch too small for all of us. Then one Tuesday, during chemistry lab, my phone buzzed. It was my dad. Evan's family had filed an appeal. They'd hired a high-profile lawyer from New York, the kind who gets rich boys out of trouble like it's a game. My hands started shaking so bad I dropped the test tube. The TA asked if I was okay. I nodded. But I wasn't. The new lawyer wasted no time launching a media campaign. Showed up on podcasts, talk shows, anywhere with a microphone. Said we were liars. Said it was all for money. Pointed to the university settlement like it proved we were gold diggers. Said Evan was the real victim here. A young man whose future had been stolen by a mob of angry girls. Lena found the clips first. Sent them to our group chat at 2 a.m. We stayed up together that night, listening to this man reshape our pain into a lie. He claimed the recordings were edited. Claimed we seduced Evan for evidence. That my dad had coached us all. Every word cut like a blade. Felt like being assaulted all over again, but this time in surround sound. Nina wanted to fight back. Go on record. Set the story straight. But my dad said no. Told us we won where it mattered, in court. Public opinion won't change that. And feeding the fire only gives it oxygen. He was right. But it still hurt to watch strangers debate our truth. The appeal meant more legal meetings. More depositions. More strangers asking deeply personal questions. Evan's new lawyer was ruthless. Asked about our old tweets, our high school party photos. Wanted to know if we ever drank. Who we dated. How short our skirts were. He was digging for anything to throw mud on our names. And then came the messages. Again. Support from some. But mostly, hate. They found my Instagram, even though it was private. My number. My email. Calls came in at 3 a.m. Just breathing. Then whispers. You ruined his life. We know where you live. He's innocent. You'll pay. Campus security stepped up patrols. But they couldn't be everywhere. I'd catch a glimpse of some guy who looked like one of Evan's friends and go into a full panic. Sprint to a building. Lock myself in a bathroom stall until my heart stopped racing. Later I'd realize he wasn't even someone I knew. Just another student. But in those moments, my body didn't know the difference. Lena started to fall apart. She had been our rock during the trial, the undercover, the quiet strength, the one who had carried so much. Our secret weapon. But the aftermath? It crushed her. She stopped going to class. Stopped showering. Barely spoke. Her roommate called me, worried. Said Lena hadn't moved from bed in 3 days. Just laid there, staring at the ceiling, playing the same sad song on loop. So we showed up. All of us. Brought her favorite snacks, sat on the floor of her dorm, and didn't leave until she talked. Until she really talked. And when she finally broke, it was all at once. She sobbed so hard she could barely breathe. Said she felt like a traitor, like she'd betrayed Evan's friends. Even though they were monsters. Even though she knew she'd done the right thing. She couldn't shake the guilt. The feeling that somehow, deep down, she was a bad person. Meanwhile, Nina's family started getting calls. Her little sister was being bullied at school, kids saying their family was full of liars. That Nina had made it all up for attention. Her parents wanted her to come home. Transfer. Start over somewhere quiet, somewhere safe. But Nina wouldn't run. Not now. Not after everything. The university, on the other hand, started pretending we didn't exist. They stopped returning our calls. The promises they'd made to the new policies, the support services, the independent reporting system, all crumbling already. The one counselor running the whole thing was overwhelmed and underfunded. It was a broken lifeline. And me? My grades were tanking. I'd been pre-med since my first semester. A 3.9 GPA. I was that kid. The one who planned everything. Now? I was barely holding it together in organic chemistry. Couldn't concentrate. Couldn't even sit through a lab without flinching at the wrong smells or sounds. Flashbacks everywhere. My advisor suggested I take a semester off. Said it might help, but I couldn't bring myself to step back. That would feel too much like letting them win. And then we heard Evan's uncle had been transferred. No more regular prison. He was moved to some cushy minimum security place with tennis courts and weekly wine tastings. His lawyers argued he wasn't a threat, just a man who made mistakes with paperwork. The judge agreed. Said he'd done enough time in general population. I wanted to scream. The injustice of it was suffocating. Then something shifted. A real journalist reached out, through my dad. Not a podcaster chasing clicks. Not some guy with a mic and a bias. She was the real deal. Older, in her 50s. Wore flannel and denim and had kind eyes and weathered hands. She'd been quietly following our case for months. Digging deep. Found patterns going back generations in Evan's family. Said she wanted to tell the whole story. The true story. But only if we were willing. We met her at a diner just off campus. She showed us her past work, investigative reports that had taken down trafficking rings, exposed corporate corruption. She wasn't in this for fame. She was in it for truth. We agreed to speak with her. She spent weeks interviewing us one by one. Asked the hard questions, but always with empathy. Always respectfully. She actually listened when we answered. She verified everything. Dug into court records, university funding. Found links we hadn't seen. Donations from Evan's family going back decades, strategic ones, targeted to specific programs and administrators. Always right after someone in their family got into trouble. Turns out Evan's older brother had been accused of something similar in high school. It all got buried under a pile of money. When the article dropped, it hit like a bomb. Front page of a major paper. Picked up everywhere by wire services. No dramatics. Just facts. Laid out clean and devastating. Names. Dates. Dollar amounts. Confirmed. Verified. Untouchable. Evan's family lawyer vanished after that. No more podcasts. No more media tours. The appeal? It stalled. Their PR firm dropped them. Sponsors pulled out. Donations dried up. And then more victims came forward from our school, from Evan's high school, from his brother's fraternity at another college. The pattern was undeniable. The rot went deep. The university board couldn't dodge it anymore. They called an emergency meeting. Couldn't claim ignorance. Couldn't hide behind empty statements. Alumni were threatening to withdraw donations. Parents were pulling their kids out. They needed to act. 3 more administrators were fired, quietly, but definitively. An external firm was hired to overhaul their entire response system. And this time, real money was allocated for support services. For training. For prevention. Everything they should have done from the beginning. After the article, Lena started to come back to herself. She said seeing the truth in print helped her feel sane again. Like all the gaslighting she'd endured had finally been undone. She started therapy twice a week. Took her meds consistently. She was still healing, but now she was fighting again. Nina got accepted into her dream grad program with a full ride to study public policy. She wanted to write legislation. Change the system for real. Her family couldn't have been prouder. Her little sister even wrote her college entrance essay about having a hero for a sister. We cried when Nina read it aloud. As for me, I retook organic chemistry over the summer. Clawed my GPA back up above a 3.5. Not perfect, but solid. And my med school applications? They weren't just about academics anymore. They were about surviving. About fighting. Some schools passed on me. Others saw what I'd been through and saw strength. Evan's appeal was denied officially. His attorney quit. His family stopped showing up to visit. Even they couldn't fake it anymore. He was finally alone, with nothing but the weight of his own choices. More universities began contacting us, asking us to speak. Help them fix broken systems before they became lawsuits. So we started something. A small consulting group. We reviewed policies. Trained admin told our story to help others avoid what we went through. We turned our trauma into purpose. The nightmares faded, slowly. Therapy helped. Time helped. But mostly, each other helped. We still text at odd hours. Share memes. Complain about professors, ghosting boys, too much reading. Honestly, regular college problems felt like luxuries after everything we'd lived through. Lena's sister graduated with a degree in social work, took a job at a crisis center, said we'd inspired her to become the advocate she once needed, to be the voice that says you're not alone to someone sitting in the dark. Then, one day, I ran into one of Evan's old friends at a coffee shop. He saw me. Our eyes met. And he looked away immediately. He practically bolted out of the coffee shop, left his expensive latte sitting on the counter, still steaming. It was a small thing, but it felt satisfying in a way I can't really explain. Most of them had transferred schools after the article dropped. They couldn't handle the stares, the whispers, the reality of people knowing what they'd done. The evidence from the trophy folder had opened the floodgates. The FBI got involved and found more like it, other schools, other groups. It turned out this wasn't just one bad frat. It was a network. A whole sick, twisted subculture of entitled predators trading advice and tactics. Even victims. The investigation expanded to a national level. Our case had blown the lid off something massive, something systemic. My dad framed the article from that Monday morning, hung it in his office next to his degrees, said it was the case he was proudest of not because of the legal win, but because it mattered. Because we didn't just fight. We changed things. We made sure future students would be safer. We stood up to power and money and didn't flinch. And it worked. Nina started dating someone during junior year. A quiet guy from her stats class. At first, she was terrified. Thought for sure he'd turn out to be hiding something. Waited for the shoe to drop. But it never did. He was just, kind, patient, listened, respected her boundaries. Proof that good men existed. That love didn't have to come with fear. We all went to Lena's graduation together. Cheered way too loudly when her name was called. Her parents cried. Her sister cried. Honestly, we all cried. Again. She'd come close to dropping out more times than we could count. But she didn't. She stuck with it. Graduated with honors in psychology. She wanted to get her doctorate. Wanted to help others the way she'd been helped. The university built a memorial garden and named it after all of us. Each bench had a small plaque telling part of our story. It was beautiful and also a little strange. Seeing your trauma turned into landscaping is something you don't expect. But students sat there, studying, talking, reading those plaques. They were learning what happened. And that mattered. Evan sent me a letter from prison. My dad intercepted it before I ever saw it. Asked if I wanted to read it. I said no. Whatever Evan had to say didn't matter anymore. His words had no hold over me. My dad shredded it on the spot. Said it was probably just another manipulative ploy to feel in control. We took part of our settlement money and started a scholarship fund. For students who'd experienced assault. For those who might otherwise have had to drop out. The university matched our contribution. Over time, it grew. Every year, it helped dozens of students stay in school. Helped them keep going. It was something beautiful born from something horrible. I got into medical school eventually. Not my first choice, but still a good program. I decided to specialize in trauma-informed care. Wanted to become the doctor I once needed. The one who wouldn't ask the wrong questions. Who would understand that healing isn't linear. That trauma doesn't disappear. That it lives in the body. That listening, really listening, is the first step toward healing. The 5-year anniversary of the trial passed quietly. We met up for dinner. Ordered too much food. Laughed about nothing. No one mentioned what day it was. We didn't need to. We knew. It had become a part of us, but it didn't define us anymore. We were more than the worst thing that ever happened to us. Evan's uncle died in prison. Heart attack, apparently. He was only 55. Evan wasn't allowed to attend the funeral. Not that it mattered, his family didn't want him there anyway. They disowned him. Changed their last name. Wanted no trace of what he'd done attached to them. The changes at our university became a model for others. Federal policies were updated based on our case. Reporting protocols. Training programs. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. Progress that would live longer than any of us. Our names were now part of something that mattered. Nina lives in D.C. now. She's working in policy, drafting laws that protect students across the country. Lena became a trauma therapist. She helps survivors find their voice like she found hers. Her sister runs a nonprofit that helps students access legal support after assault. Each of us found a way to turn pain into purpose. Sometimes, I walk past that corner in the library, that third-floor spot where it all started. The plaque is still there. Students study nearby, earbuds in, oblivious to what that space once meant. And you know what? That's okay. They don't need to know. They're safe now because we weren't. Because we spoke up. Because we fought. Because we won. And for me, that's enough.